Thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call the January 3, 2022 meeting of the Meridian Transportation Commission meeting to order. We will start with the roll call. Mr. Ballard. Mr. Ballard is here, but still trying to find his name tag. No, Ms. Carson tells me there's no message in that, sir. Zachary Shoemaker.
Here.
Ron Lancaster. Present. Walter Steed is here. Tracy Hopkins.
Present.
Stephen Lewis.
Here.
Jared Smith.
Mr. Smith, let me know that he will not be present.
Okay, thank you. Tom LeClaire. Joseph Leckie. Luke Kavanagh. Sean Martin. Welcome. Tony Tisdale. Artie Huntley.
Mr.
Lisa
Chair,
Taysom.
I apologize for interrupting. It looks like Jared Smith is on Zoom.
There he is. Hey, Jared, can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Chair. This is Tony Tisdale. I just joined as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Lisa Taysom.
Mr. Chair, this is Stephen Hunt. I'll be sitting in for Alyssa, who is out sick today.
Okay, welcome, Stephen. Justin Price.
Here.
Welcome. Okay, that is the roll. Welcome all. The next item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes, corrections, anything to do with the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
We have a motion? And a
Second.
second?
Commissioner Hopkins, second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye, adopting the agenda.
Aye.
Aye.
Agenda is adopted. Okay, the next item is the election of officers, being a new year. Current officers are myself as chair and Jared Smith as vice chair. As chair, I will open the floor for nominations. We'll do the chair first and vice chair second. Mr. Ballard. We have a nomination for myself as a second term. Other nominations for chair?
Mr. Chairman, will you accept a nomination for a second term?
Yes, sir, Mr. Lancaster, I would. Thank you.
I will second that then.
Was that a motion, Mr. Lancaster?
I thought it can be if you'd like. Yes, I would say yes.
Since I've got a second from Mr. Hopkins, we'll consider the motion in a second. Any discussion? All in favor of electing me as chair for a second year, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? As the chair, we will accept nominations for vice chair for this next year.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would like to nominate Jared Smith to continue a second term as vice chair.
We have a nomination for Mr. Smith for another year as vice chair. Other nominations for vice chair? Close the nominations and ask for a motion. Mr. Ballard makes the motion to have Jared Smith serve a second year as vice chair. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Lewis. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Jared, congratulations. We'll get together and talk to them about raising our pay, but that's probably not going to happen. Okay, next item is the approval of the minutes of December 6, 2021. Comments, notations, suggestions, changes? I see several nods saying no. I don't have any. We'll accept a motion to adopt the minutes of the December 6, 2021 meeting.
Chairman,
I heard Mr. Ballard first and Mr. Leclerc second as a seconder. With a motion and a second to adopt the minutes of December 6. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Under old business, we have a transportation projects update from Mrs. Carson. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As per usual, I'll do a brief update of the transportation projects, and if you have any questions afterwards, I'll stand for those. All new information is bolded in the packet beginning on page 6. The first highlight I want to make is the integrated 5-year work plan or work program. You probably would have expected to see that now from ACHD. They did let us know that the prioritization will begin in the summer rather than beginning in the fall this year. So that will be out a few months as they are reevaluating and updating that methodology. The city was invited to participate in that process. So we'll be sitting in on the work team that's looking at the prioritization methodology that's being used for programming those projects. The second update is Linda Road, Overland to Franklin widening and overpass. Keller and Associates was the selected consultant for design. And that's estimated to begin around February 2022 and run for 18 months. On page 7, the Locust Grove Road, Victory to Overland, and the roundabout at Victory, ACHD does intend to sign that for 35 miles per hour. It was noted in the most recent update from staff that there is no traffic calming in that design, virtually no traffic calming included in that design. And also wanted to note that the Hawk signal will be moved halfway between Mastiff and Puffin. And as of now, there's not a pedestrian refuge island planned for that Hawk signal. The last update I have is on page 8 and 9. I just wanted to highlight for you. I'm not going to read through all the residential capital maintenance programs, but I wanted to highlight for you that those were added just in an effort to have more information in the packet as was requested. And after going over all the different options last month, I did include the residential capital maintenance program or projects in the packet as well. And at this time, I can stand for any questions on project updates.
Any questions from Mrs. Carson on the update? Mr. Leclerc.
The first item, the ACHD process. So that's a working group. It's a staff level group.
It is.
Council involved yet? No.
Yes, Commissioner Chair, it is a staff member work team.
All right. Is there going to be some kind of an opportunity to see like a draft process change or for us, or is it just going to roll and be, this is what we're doing?
So my assumption, and we know how those can go sometimes, but Mr. Chair, Commissioner, my assumption would be that that is a process that will have to be taken to their ACHD commission before it goes into place. That's a prioritization process that's been in place for years now with only minor updates. So I believe any kind of big overhaul, which is what it sounds like may be happening, is going to have to go to their commission. The kickoff meeting is in January, so I should have more information on it in February.
Mr. Leclerc, one other thing I can tell you about that, as the city's representative to the CICAC, the Capital Investment Citizen Advisory Commission of ACHD, I've been selected from that subgroup to be a representative on the methodology steering committee that you're asking about. So we have myself, and apparently from what Ms. Carson's saying, a staff member will join as well. It is not, I know about one half more sentence about this than you do, but it is not a prioritization process. It is a methodology looking at how they do it. They have a consultant involved, so it's going to be more of a, this is how we've done it. This is how we might think about doing it, and presumably forming a recommendation to ACHT about how to move forward. But they wanted apparently to put several months in there to allow that process to happen before they make the next list. We'll keep you posted. Other questions from Ms. Carson? Okay, hearing none, is Sergeant Dance with us?
Mr. Chair, he let me know he should be here about 4:15, so we may just need to move his item.
We will move the item over when and pick it up when he arrives.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question that I didn't unmute in time for.
Mr. Hopkins, go ahead.
So do you know what's driving the change? Because I've noticed ACHD's not bidding projects like they normally do, and things don't look normal. Do you know what's driving this process change, this methodology change?
As I told Mr. Leclerc a moment ago, I only know about a half a sentence more about this than you do. I can certainly take your question and try to find an answer to it. I have no idea.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, send me an email so I can keep it in mind. And way to go, Mr. Hopkins. We have Mr. Martin coming to the podium who may have an answer for you.
Turned it on, so.
Okay, sounds like it's working.
Yes, sir.
Mr. President, yeah, just wanted to maybe answer a couple questions on that. I'm certainly not, my expertise is the planning and priority of our section ACHD, but I do watch enough commission meetings to kind of have an idea what's going on. Our commission, previously we have separate priority lists, one for community programs, one for roads, maybe another one for intersections, sidewalks. The wish of our commission is to have basically one priority list, trying to figure out a way, how can you compare filling a sidewalk gap versus widening a roadway to 5 lanes? How do you make that decision? Which one's more important? So that's the idea of why they're trying to revamp the system, trying to figure out a better way to compare projects when they're not really easy to compare, or like a bridge. How does a bridge rank versus installing a bike lane? Like I said, previously we'd have separate priority lists for all of these. And then we would try to say, well, we're going to spend 20% of our budget on this, and we'll spend 40% on this. Now they're going to try to figure out a way to rank projects against themselves.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hopkins, that may not be the total answer to your question, but it's a start.
Thank you. I was just kind of curious. Things feel different, and as a contractor, you don't like changes.
I understand. Okay, jumping ahead to item 4 on our agenda, the North Records Way at Bree Development. This item was brought to us by a group from Bree Development, which is a over 55 residential apartment complex on North Records Way. You all have a copy of their very comprehensive memo to the City Council, which was sent the first part of December, if memory serves me. The council, and Mr. Kavanagh might want to speak up to this. It went to council. I believe council did look at it, possibly talked about it, but ended up sending it to our group to look at in detail. Is that correct?
Commissioner Steed, I can provide a little bit of background. So before every city council meeting, commission, we have a public forum section of our agenda, which allows any member of the public to come before the city council for 3 minutes and talk about any issue that is near and dear to their heart. Because we don't know what those topics are, we can't notice for those particular issues. So when a citizen comes before the council, they say, this is what we want to share. The council thanks them for that information, but we don't deliberate, we don't take any action, in part because we haven't properly noticed to the public that we're going to do that. So traditionally, after those, if they require any type of follow-up, the mayor's office typically drives that. It was noted, I think, from many members of the council that this body has been very action-oriented over the past couple of years, and it seemed appropriate to allow that citizen group to come speak to this commission to bring forth any recommendations to the city council for further action.
Thank you, sir. So it's kind of what I've heard one community call opening up the mic for quote, the good of the city.
Correct.
And anybody can bring anything. Too many barking dogs, cars rolling a stop sign or whatever.
Mr. Chairman, I think it was the council's intention and effort to be more welcoming and to allow our citizens that the issues that are important to them, to make sure that the city council and the mayor are aware of them so that we have that opportunity to take any action if needed.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Chairman, before we get too far, I'd like to thank the mayor and city council for sending us this topic. This is exactly what we've been talking about for a few years as far as working together, with our elected officials. And so Councilman Cavanagh, thank you. And, councilman and chairman, if you'll pass our thanks along to the mayor as well.
Be happy to do that. Thank you. Okay, as I said, we have representatives here from the Bree Village Traffic Safety Group. I will allow you to come forward to speak to us. I'd ask that you select who wishes to come first. If you would, give us your name, your address. We'll give you as much time as you think you need to a point. We have read your letter, I'm pretty sure, and taken a look at the situation, so we have a little bit of knowledge, but feel free to reiterate anything you feel that's very important. We have your slide up on our screen, so you may introduce yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is John Wheeler. I live in the Bree development. That's 2233 North Records Way. We've been there about a year or so now, so we've become rather acquainted with Records Way and the traffic that goes along there. And I must quickly say that we appreciate very much the way that the city council handled this. They were very welcoming, they're very open, and we appreciate being referred to this group. I'm not going to go through the letter. You guys have read that. What I do want to do is I want to talk specifically first about what we have as issue number 4. It's the crosswalk. Because it seems to me like this is a good one to start talking about, because when you look at the problem that's there, it becomes, I think, rather obvious that something needs to be done. I've asked, we've put up a graph here, and I'll see if I can get, I had a problem with this at the council meeting. I couldn't get the mouse to go where I wanted it to. I'll just point out.
I saw the pointer move at one point.
Yeah,
You did something to make it move.
There we go. Okay. Well, this brown spot you see in this aerial is now where the Bree building is at. So I just want to point that out. This aerial was done before that property was developed. And this is a part of what's happened with Records Way over the last several years that has changed the dynamics of the street. With the development of these apartments, there's the Bree apartment, and then north of that, there's a series of other apartments. You've got a significant number of people living along that street. Across the street from the Bree is the Julius Kleiner Park, and it justifiably attracts a whole lot of people because it's simply a beautiful place for families to gather, events to take place. And what we've observed over the last year is the problem that exists between the traffic for the park and the parking that's available. That parking lot that is just to the south of the Bree building. There we go. Get it more. Okay, right there. That parking lot is the largest off-site parking space available for the park. And when they have large events, that parking lot gets filled with people who then want to cross over to the park. And the only way that they can go now, that is without jaywalking, is to go up to River Valley Road. There's crosswalk there, or they have to go down off the south end of my aerial for a ways all the way to Village Drive, and there are walkways there. So essentially, you've got this big parking lot sitting there, and there's nothing feeding from that from that lot directly over to the park. And what we're suggesting is that there be a crosswalk put in. If you go physically and look at the property, and I think, Mr. Chairman, you indicated you've done that, that the end of the building sits almost directly across from the path into the park, the walking path into the park that lies directly across the road. And what we're suggesting is a crosswalk there to facilitate the passage of people back and forth across Records Way.
Mr. Wheeler, if I can interrupt you, that parking lot we're looking at in your picture, the gray parking lot, that is not parking for your building.
That's correct.
It's for the mall and for the park.
Yeah, but the brief facility contains parking underneath.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's not Bree parking. The foot traffic that's created now out of Bree, we presently have about 130 people there, adds to the problem of people getting back and forth across the street. So that is the principal suggestion I wanted to talk with you about first. Any questions that you may have, I'll certainly try to answer them. You guys are experts in this field. I am not. I only know what I see when I look out and watch people go back and forth across the street. And I know they don't walk down to either one of those crosswalks because it's just too far. It doesn't make any sense. And if you look across at the park, which you'll see over here, that's the amphitheater. Okay, and then farther south here, that's the playground, and then there's a large shelter there. Most of the big events that take place in the park take place either at the amphitheater or that big shelter. So you can see that crosswalk would help center then access to the park from the parking lot.
Okay.
Any questions that I might?
Questions for Mr. Wheeler at this point?
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Hopkins.
Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'm curious, I'd like to hear Sean Martin's comment about this, and maybe now's not the time, we can listen to the end, but why you would put a parking lot across from a place that's going to attract big events and not have a method of crossing right there. And maybe it's county, something to do with county code or something, but that just seems a little, I mean, where he's got that crosswalk and the pathway right there almost seems natural to me.
We concur.
Okay. I was planning on asking Mr. Martin to speak later once we get through all the discussion and comments. So he's made note of your question, and I'm sure he'll address it.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Watkins? Mr. Ballard.
I'm sorry, I'm hard of hearing, so it's. That's correct. Did we consider that? No, we were looking for lower cost options. I mean, if I suppose one could do that, but it would, you take up a bunch of the parking spot and then you take some park property away, but I'm not gonna, we did not. Thank you.
Other questions from Mr. Wheeler?
Mr. Chairman, we can't hear Commissioner Ballard at all, or at least I can't.
I will try to get him to speak into the mic better. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, sir. You had
okay, that answers
someone
the
else
question. I'd
that
like
wished
to
to
ask
speak as well?
I'd like to ask Dave Dahl to come up and address the intersection issues and the speed limit issues.
Okay. Thank you.
Dave, if you would. Thank you, John.
Your name and address, please.
Let's make sure I can be heard. My name is David Dahl. I live at Debris, 2233 North Records Way. And I wanted to address the issue, kind of hitch my wagon up with John here. We have two other issues that are plaguing that street right now. And right now, that street, as we all know, when that street was built, the dynamics of that area have completely changed. Now we have a lot of residents there, more traffic, more people going up and down Records Way, both driving as well as pedestrians. It's at a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. And what we're seeing quite frequently is people really exceeding the speed limit, doing 40, 45, especially when traffic is a little bit lighter. And at night, we see a lot of just people just basically racing up and down that street. They're using it as a strip off of Eagle that they can really rev their engines up and tear out. The statute that we mentioned in the letter 49-207 allows the city to adjust street limits as conditions allow. And what we would like to propose, given all of the factors in there, is a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. We have basically two vulnerable populations in there right now. We have elderly and lots of kids. And the speed limit, we believe, being 30 is excessive, especially since they are often speeding way past that limit. The other issue is, if you look up here on River Valley, boy, that is a jumpy mouse right there. That's a three-way or four-way stop. I guess it's three-way stop. But what we're seeing is that people coming in and taking that right on the Records Way, they're rolling, stopping. And we're seeing a lot of times where they're not even basically slowing down. What they're doing is they're looking to the left. They're coming up and looking to the left to see if there's any traffic coming in. If there's not, they're just going through. Now, the problem here and vulnerability here is that we have a crosswalk right here, and people aren't looking at that crosswalk. And if we have one of the pedestrian using that crosswalk, it really opens up the chance of something bad happening. So we see a lot of rolling stops, a lot of just not even slowing down. They're just going through. They look left, they see no traffic, and they just go through, and they're not considering the crosswalk. So those are the two things that I'd like to address. We'd like to see more, if possible, police looking over that rolling stop, that area there, have a little bit more enforcement with that rolling stop. We'd like to see, especially if we can get a crosswalk in there, by the Bree up there to allow people from that parking lot over. We'd like to see that speed limit drop down to 25. And of course, more police enforcement on speeding in that area, because we see a lot of that. I think that's it. So
Okay.
I'll open it up for questions if you guys have any.
Any questions from the council commissioners?
John, did I cover everything? Yeah.
I don't think we have any other questions.
Okay,
Mr.
great.
Chairman,
Well,
Mr. Chairman. No,
Mr.
sorry.
Leclerc.
Dave,
Yes, sir.
I saw another note here about excessive exhaust issue.
Yeah.
You didn't mention that. but-
Well, the excessive exhaust issue, we were looking at remedies, and we don't really want to overburden, police being out there with what, a decibel meter, you know, whatever. I know there are exhaust codes on exhaust and they can't have, you know, exhaust systems added on after market and that stuff. What we're thinking though, is that if we can bring down the speed limit and, you know, we will minimize the potential for excessive exhaust. What they're doing is they're revving the RPMs up. They're getting up to a higher rate of speed and that gets the exhaust systems going. We don't want to, you know, ask for too much, I guess is what we're saying. The main thing is safety. And that's why we're looking at the crosswalk, the speed limit and the rolling stops.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Dahl.
Yes, sir.
So related, maybe, is there heavy traffic? Is there heavy truck use of this as sort of a bypass to the busy intersection?
Yeah, there's
Is
two.
there some of that?
We looked at that. We went on observations for many hours and we looked at that. What we're seeing is there is heavy traffic at times, especially during the holiday season. There was heavy traffic. And that kind of takes out everything, you know, except for maybe the pedestrian issue. But in terms of the noise level, we see a lot of trucks, a lot of contractors, and you know, that's one factor. But the other factor is we just see a lot of kind of sports cars, you know, young kids that are revving it up and tearing out, and they do that, I would assume, because they have this exhaust system and they want to hear it roar. That's my assumption, but that seems to be into play a lot with these little kind of aftermarket exhaust systems in these cars.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to close by thanking you all.
You have somebody else behind you, sir.
And let you know, let you know that we do have a lot of number of files, audio files.
Into the mic, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a lot of files available for whatever working group you may put together. And we're certainly ready to share it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm John Swartz. I live at the Bree as well in apartment 531. I've lived there for 4 months now. We're currently buying a house over at the Cadence. Not that that has a lot of relevance here, but I guess what I've seen, and I'm kind of speaking out of coordination here with the rest of the guys, but I guess my question is when all around the city, commonly, we see this issue, which I believe one of these gentlemen's brought up about the noise. And it perplexes me that there's not something that's being done to try to enforce the state laws that are currently, my understanding, on the books about modified exhaust systems and so forth. I'll give you an example. When I was going the other day over here at the Fred Meyer's, I mean, there was this lady crossing out of the main of the building and going over to the parking lot. And there was this guy that appeared to be a little bit annoyed at the fact that he had to maybe stop to let her go across. As soon as he went past the crosswalk, he got on his exhaust and it was just deafening. And I just couldn't believe it that, you know, something like that would go on. But I guess, and maybe it's inappropriate for me to ask this question, but knowing the extent of the stuff that's going on, and there doesn't appear to be, unless I'm not knowledgeable enough about this, any mechanism to try to dampen this concern. And I just didn't know if you guys could share with anything about, is there something that's going to be done to try to address this issue or not? I guess I just wanted to know.
Well, I can assure you that we can't answer that, but we happen to have with us Sergeant Dance with the Meridian Police Department.
I think we talked on the phone. Yes.
Sergeant, there's a lot to unpack that these three gentlemen have put before us. Would you like to take a stab at some parts of it, please?
Yes, thank you. So specifically regarding your question about the noise, as we kind of discussed over the phone, I think a few weeks ago, yes, there is state law in place regarding modified exhaust, and that is an enforceable violation that we do enforce. But as I talked to you before, the fine amount for that violation is fairly minimal. And in a lot of cases, it's not enough to make somebody want to go out and remodify their exhaust or put it back to a stock exhaust. And so that's one of the main issues.
And I appreciate that, Sergeant Dean. I guess my point being is, how do we try to get our hands around the issue? If I understand what you just said and you shared with me again, there appears to be an enforcement activity that maybe is not stringent enough or severe enough to try to convince these people to come in compliance with state law. Is there something that maybe needs to be addressed by this committee or the city council, like Boise City did back in 2017 to enact stricter noise ordinances on their exhaust system? And I'm just trying to reach out to try, because I live in Meridian, and you know, I mean, you can go, it's very unfortunate, because if we try to enjoy activities over at the Bree or at the park even, you know, it's a beautiful complex. They got an outside pool, an outside area. And then when you're sitting there and you have these guys going through, and your point was very well taken, there is construction traffic, there's those type of trucks. But in all honestly, the thing that's the biggest problem are these, what appears to be these sports cars that are going through with these modified exhaust systems. And it's unfortunate that you have people that want to enjoy an environment to that extent, and they can't because you have a few, and it's only probably maybe 5 or 10% of the people at most that are doing this, but it's very unfortunate that you can't have a quality of life to be able to go out and enjoy a pool or patio area or barbecue area without listening to this stuff. And it's a little bit irritating to me as a citizen, knowing that there's state laws on the books to prevent that type of stuff from happening, but there appears to be some lack of an enforcement tool to maybe prevent it from happening. And that, I think that's just what you had indicated.
Correct. And it's, you know, it also comes down to the ability to enforce it, meaning the manpower, the time and dedication, the resources put to specifically that violation, when we have a lot of other stuff as well. And there really isn't an easy solution to that. You know, we don't set the fine amounts.
Right. And I realize that you folks have a large city to cover and you got a lot of issues to cover, but at the end of the day, should there be a recommendation from you or somebody else to the city council to ask if there's some way to stiffen up these fines so that we just don't have this continue going on in the capacity that we have it going on?
Mr. Schwartz, that the exhaust is an item that's in the letter from redevelopment, which is what we've got on our agenda today. So we will take a look at it as part of this. I don't want to let this totally get off into exhaust issues, because as you understand from the sergeant's comments, it's a hard one to get their arms
And I
around.
do appreciate you listening to us because it is sensitive.
And we appreciate you coming. You have a council member here that's hearing more explanation about this, as well as the head of the MPD transportation.
And I do really respect your time, and I didn't want to be overly bearing on this, but it is a big issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We hear you. Sergeant Dance, could we ask you to speak further to the other items that these gentlemen have brought up, please?
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, I hope our guests will stay. It looks like you're getting ready to take off, but I hope you'll stay for the discussion too. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
For the fun part.
Yeah.
Sergeant Dance.
Thank you. I walked in, I think, partway through the first part of this. So what I understand is the proposal of a crosswalk here at the screen I'm looking at. And I don't see any reason why we wouldn't support that. Now, again, I don't know if we have anybody from ACHD that's here with us. But so I think that discussion would have to go through ACHD, any kind of changes or additions made to the roadway there. And that would go for the speed study that would need to be done, I'm assuming, at that location. I don't remember when the last one was done, but if I'm not mistaken, I think there has to be an 18-month time frame or time period there before another speed study can be done. So those are all things that I wouldn't not support, or that I wouldn't not suggest they do, but those are things that would have to go through ACHD, certainly.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I may ask a follow-up of Sergeant Dance. So you hinted at this before, and I guess I'm going to ask it more explicitly, but what capacity do you have for extra enforcement activities? So here specifically, the request was for speed enforcement and we heard about sound enforcement, right? So, as I recall, the traffic section in the city is 3 officers. If I'm a little bit off, I apologize, but this is what I'm remembering, right? And you're all busy, right? As well as all the rest of the officers in the city. It's a relatively small police force. So I know the traffic section takes on, different emphases, however you say that, at various times. So, what is the enforcement capacity that the city police has?
The traffic team is 7 dedicated police officers. That includes myself as a sergeant. I have a corporal, and then 5 other police officers that are tasked with handling the majority of traffic related issues throughout the city. And so, as you can imagine, we have several areas of concern where we get citizens that would request our presence and ability to enforce different violations that they are seeing throughout the city, and in other locations such as where you're seeing these on Records Avenue. And our team is tasked with handling the majority of all the crashes that occur within the city, which, depending on the day and the weather, can be quite cumbersome. We're also tasked with doing as much enforcement as we can do, but a lot of times our resources are used up in just calls for service throughout the city, whether it be crashes or complaints, traffic complaints, hazards. And so we do have a list of areas that we keep on our big board in our office, where we ask our guys, when you're available, can you guys please go to these different areas and look for these violations and enforce these violations that our citizens are seeing. And Records Way is one of those locations that's on our big board. And we do have officers that we have asked to sit at different locations on Records Way, and we will continue to ask them to do that. But again, it's with the growth of the city, the amount of traffic we have here, we're burdened with a lot as well. And, I don't take lightly your concerns or your requests, and I want to help out as much as we can. I would just ask that you understand that there's a lot of people in this city, there's a lot of roadways, and we're doing the best we can. So that's what I would say as far as resources go. And
Mr. Lancaster, if I may, I have not spent hours out there, as these gentlemen say they have, watching what's going on Records Way, but I did spend 10 or 15 minutes watching that stop sign. I had to park in the north apartment complex parking lot to do it, because there's no parking along Records Way or the cross street. And if I may, for the sergeant, it makes it hard on them to park and do any enforcement. They can see what's happening, but their ability to make a stop from being parked inside of a parking lot is really a challenge. So this is a peculiar situation. You've got, as someone pointed out, cars going east on River Valley do tend to roll that stop sign a little bit, like they do at a lot of 3- and 4-way stops around the city. I saw one car totally run it. He never even hit his brake. But I think he did what one of y'all said. He looked left. There was nobody to the left, and he just kept on trucking. But had I been a police officer sitting in that parking lot, there wouldn't have been a thing I could have done about it because I couldn't have gotten to him. He'd have been long gone. So it has its challenges. I'm going to open this up for a few more comments and questions from the commissioners, realizing that then I want to call Sean Martin from ACHD to the podium to respond to what all we've heard. So maybe put some fine points on where we are at this, and then we'll let Mr. Martin have the floor. Mr. Lancaster.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may take just a couple minutes. So this is close to my wheelhouse, if you will. And I guess for our guests, I don't know how much you know about our commission. A few of us are just interested citizens. A few of us are have business interests in the city. Some of us have expertise in traffic engineering. Some are more than one, I guess. And so, that's who we are up here. So I'm a traffic engineer by trade. I'm employed as a traffic engineer, but when I'm here, I'm representing me as a citizen of Meridian with traffic engineering expertise. So, and we've got, I shouldn't forget Commissioner Leckie too. He's here because he's young and his brain still works, unlike the rest of us. So he keeps us on track. Anyway, with that said, if I can share just a little bit about traffic engineer perspective, you all seem like reasonable people. You've written a very reasonable letter with pretty reasonable requests, I think. So if I can add just a little bit, and I'm trying not to use too much leash here, Mr. Chairman, but on the exhaust, I bought a used car just before Christmas. The muffler was completely gone, but that's fixed now. So anyway, you're welcome. So speed limits come up a lot. We hear them here a lot. I hear them in my employment a lot. Mr. Martin, who we're going to speak here in a minute, I'm sure he hears them a lot too. So he'll have a chance to rebut anything I say here, but some of the engineering principles, if you will, speed limits, if they're done correctly, they should seem really high. It should be uncomfortable to drive that fast. And the reason being is it's a limit, right? It's a top speed. We want most people to drive slower. And we do that for a few reasons. One, we don't want to burden police, right? So we don't want to make 90% of road users lawbreakers, right? We want them to focus on the few that drive really fast. Okay, so it's partly resources. It's partly, like I said, we don't want to make normally law-abiding citizens lawbreakers by artificially making a speed limit too low, okay? Because it's just a number on a sign. Drivers will generally drive how they want to drive regardless of what the number on the sign says. So changing the number on the sign usually does very little. So I realize I'm telling you some things that you probably don't want to hear, but here's some of the engineering perspective. So speed limits are kind of set by democracy. It's kind of our purest democracy. Drivers vote with their gas pedal, and engineers set the speed limit accordingly. So, changing the number on the sign may not change behavior, I guess is my conclusion to all of that. That's a perspective to keep in mind. As far as the crosswalk, a a question that I'll have for either Miranda or Mr. Martin is this intersection an intersection of public streets? If it is, by law, all public intersections are crosswalks, whether they're marked as such or not. So you can cross there if it's a public street, and I don't know if it is or not. You know, you had in your letter about radar speed feedback signs. I have my own thoughts about those. I think they're more toy than tool. You know, they can they can make the problem worse, right? And that the racers that you refer to, you know, want to see get a new high score, right? So normally those signs can be set so they turn off. They just turn blank when they hit a certain number, which is how we deal with that. But anyway, those are a couple thoughts on some of the things in your letter. But I hope that gives a little bit perspective before we hear from Mr. Martin from Ada County Highway District. He'll have an official agency response and he can rebut anything I said. But those are some of my traffic engineering principles and thoughts for you that I hope are a little bit helpful as we continue to have this discussion. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging me for just a few minutes and some of that.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Carson.
if I may add one small detail. Lieutenant Frazier had some feedback that's in your packet but hasn't been said yet. And so I just want to make sure I share it for those members of the citizen that citizens that are in the chambers. There was a discussion between the mayor and Lieutenant Frazier that's in the packet there regarding the radar speed limit being posted on a speed limit sign. So that's a separate option rather than just having that kind of radar trailer out there, is having a radar that's been posted on a speed limit sign. And that's something that has been done in the city before. In the past, I believe it was done on the city's dime. So that's something that this commission couldn't decide, but they could recommend council take a look at it if that is the wish of the commission.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Carson, do you know the answer to the question? Are both River Valley and Records Way public streets?
River Valley and Records Way, I believe I'm not sure if the Kleiner Park Loop is considered a public street, which would be the question, I believe, for the intersection of the parking lot there with Kleiner Park Loop and Records Way.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just add to that, I mean, clearly it's public because it's a public park, but whether it's considered a public street, that's the question. Or if it's considered like a driveway.
You're talking about the street within the park.
Yep, that intersects in the brown box on the screen.
Okay, thank you. Other commissioners, before we invite Mr. Martin up.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir. I have Mr. Leckey.
trying to make good on Commissioner Lancaster's claim about my brain. Just going through on Google Maps, this section of street that's adjacent to the apartments, I'm seeing there's this whole section. So from the crossroad down south up to East River Valley, we could drive down Records Way and not see a single posted speed limit. So not that street racing's necessarily my crowd, but I could see a lot of young drivers going through here and not seeing a speed limit and not really thinking about that. Maybe they're proud of their illicitly boughted car or something and just want to drive through really quickly. So I think that if the speed limit, if we decide it should be changed, or even if it should remain the same, I think posting the speed limit somewhere in that chunk of road would make it a lot more, make it less likely for people to just coast through as quickly.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ballard, did I hear you?
Yes, Mr. Hopkins, how's it, any better for you, bud?
Perfect.
Okay. No, I get it, because last month I was sick and I was having trouble hearing. I had asked the question about the proposed crosswalk, if an underground tunnel may be an option, because I'm looking at the distance of Mr. Martin and our sergeant can address this, the distance between two crosswalks may impede traffic. So that kind of defeats the purpose that you end up with a bottleneck. I suspect, or I'm looking at a photograph, that the view from the Bree complex into the park is unimpeded. It's a clear view. There's no fences. So I was thinking, crazy as it may seem, out on the freeway, there's a 10-foot wall along the freeway where there's subdivisions. That's a noise suppressor, but that takes away from the view. It takes away from the amenity of having a park there. And then maybe I get a little into the policy, but I read an article yesterday about simply civility, and Mr. Schwartz raises it. There's a fair number of us that do not always accord the other person some civility. And in the courtroom where I'm at, the comment is the world is still kind of a rough place. Now, I'm not agreeing with that, and I'd like to see if they drive 30 miles an hour and quiet, problem solved. But so I'm thinking, because I hear some comments here about how do we modify behavior, carrot or the stick. But those are just a couple of my thoughts. And are there ways to give you some assistance? I think there are, but neither side's going to like the result. But anyway, thank you.
Before we hear from Mr. Martin, any other commissioners? Mr. Martin, you'd be so kind to share with us? Yeah, your thoughts. I don't expect solutions, but we'd certainly like to hear your thoughts.
Certainly. I guess I'll just take it kind of one at a time. The crosswalk, since that's what I'm looking at here first. If the commission desires, we certainly can go out and look to see if a crosswalk is needed there. Some of the things we would look at obviously are how many people are crossing at the location already, you know, the distance between crosswalks, those kind of things. Also, it's never as simple and easy as just putting in a crosswalk with signs. We'd have to look to see if there are ped ramps there at the corners. So just make sure the crosswalk, if we did put it in, was ADA compliant. And we'd also have to make sure there's a street light there. Because the second part of the question is know that entrance to the park is considered a driveway, basically private. So it is not a public street intersection. So in order to make it a legal crosswalk, you'd have to have the ramps and the lighting and the markings. It's never as easy as just throwing some paint out there. So as I said, if the commission desires, we certainly could go out and look to see if a crosswalk makes sense there. We would just probably, given the time of year, we would probably just ask that it, be several months down the line. We'd want to make sure we do it when the weather's good, when there's events going on at the park. We don't want to do it now when there's not as many people out, obviously walking. The speed limits along there, the sergeant was correct. We did do a speed study there. I want to say it's almost been a couple years now since we did that. At the time, in consultation with Meridian Police, we actually increased the speed limit from 25, which it was at the time, to 30. So things have changed. I'm pretty sure when we did that speed study, the apartments, I'm not sure any of those apartments were actually built when we did that speed study. Things along records have changed, and they've changed rapidly. So once again, if the commission desires, we can go out there and take a new look at the speed limit. We would work with the Meridian Police Department, share the results, to say, we would make a recommendation to police and say, this is what we recommend. What do you guys think? And it could be go back to 25, stay at 30. I think those would probably be the two options. I don't see any other options besides those two.
And you would do that speed study if you did with ropes?
We would do the speed study. We could do it there two different ways. We could throw out hoses across the road and we could measure it that way, or we could have somebody go out with a radar gun and sit you know, in one of these parking lots or whatever, and they do it through a radar gun as well. And then the third thing, the radar sign. Actually, all the radar signs that were installed in Ada County were purchased by ACHD. But we did work with the cities on some of the locations. We tried to disperse them throughout the cities, but we purchased all of those, and they're about $3,000 a piece. Preliminary effectiveness, we've had them out for several years now. As Commissioner Lancaster said, they look nice, but I'm not sure how effective they actually are in getting people to change their behavior. And we do program them such that if somebody goes 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, then they just shut off so that people aren't trying to get the new high score. I think that was the 3 items. If anybody has any questions.
If I may, to the commissioner's question regarding a tunnel.
That I can think of a few locations where we may have tunnels, and mostly for the green belt type stuff around Harris Ranch. Very expensive in order to do a tunnel when something doing at grade is cheaper, and for the number of pedestrians here that we would likely count, I would think if we were to install something, it would be something at grade, not a tunnel.
Okay, and one that I have just jotted down, if it moves toward a crosswalk there, what about a halt crossing?
That is something we would look at when we have a pedestrian crossing matrix that we use at the highway district to determine what kind of crossing we would install. If we do install one, it could go anywhere from paint to a rectangular rapid flashing beacon to a PHB or hawk crossing. So that would all be part of the things that we would collect to see. I will say the crosswalk we have to the south, which I think is that Village, that is just a striped crosswalk there at the intersection.
I believe that's correct. If you don't mind taking any questions from the commissioners? Commissioners, any questions? Mr. Martin?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple, but I don't want to hog all the time here. Or run the conversation. So if there's any other commissioners that want to go first, that's fine. Then I'll ask mine. If not, I'll ask them. Okay.
So I propose the underground. How about an overground? And there is one at Overland. And again, I'm taking into consideration who uses it. You got to climb some stairs or climb an elevation, and but probably nix that option too. I would take it.
The overcrossings are actually in a lot of ways even more difficult, more expensive than going to go under, because in order to meet ADA requirements and slopes and grades, you either have to have an elevator in them or have the ramps so far out that because you have to have a certain grade for ADA, it becomes very difficult to install those as well.
Thank you. Mr. Lancaster, I yield the floor.
Mr. Leclerc, did I see your hand or anything?
Mr. Chairman, members. So the processes, next steps are what I have to ask about. So it looks like we need to, as a commission, it sounds like we need to make maybe a recommendation to do a speed study and ask the ACHD to do that on our behalf or something. Is that one step?
I think that's typically how the commission has functioned. Yes, that you would guys make a motion to do that to us. I don't think you would have to go back to the city council. I think if you were just send it directly us, that would be fine.
My understanding is we can do that as long as we're not requesting them to spend $1.50 to do something, if other than what they normally do in the course of business. I believe, Mr. Baird, that we have the ability to make that request without sending it through council.
Mr. Chair, that was my understanding as well. And to answer Mr. Leclerc's question, I apologize. Tried to make you French there for a second. The three things that were requested of council from the mayor's office were to determine if the TC wants to request a speed study, determine if the Transportation Commission wants to request an evaluation for the crosswalk, and determine if the Transportation Commission wants to request installation of the solar powered radar speed limit sign.
Okay, other questions from Mr. Martin? Before Mr. Lancaster
Mr.
has-
Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Martin.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hopkins.
So, and you've probably addressed this before, and so forgive me if I'm repeating a question, because I know we've looked at records more than once. I don't remember that particular place for a crosswalk, but is there rules on how many crosswalks and what the distance between them are?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hopkins, there isn't a rule per se, how many crosswalks you can have or how closely spaced they need to be. I would typically say, you know, if you're talking something under 600 feet or so, closest to the adjacent crosswalk, we'd probably consider that crosswalk to be close enough that people could walk the 600 feet to the adjacent. I don't know what the distance is from River Valley to this location is, but it was something we would obviously measure and then see if. The other thing is, ideally, we still want to put crosswalks where people are going to use them and where people are walking. It doesn't, we don't want to not put a crosswalk just because it's, well, they could walk, you know, a quarter mile here and get to the same place. If people are using the crosswalk or they're already using there, we might as well make it legal and make it safer for them to do so.
And keeping in mind the rolling car problem up at River Valley, which makes that crosswalk less than desirable, I would suspect. Okay, Mr. Lang.
Can I have a follow-up to that?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
And that would be, would a hawk, so if you decided it looked advantageous, will that change? Will that decision change based on distances from another crosswalk?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hopkins, no, that wouldn't change the matrix. The matrix more looks at speed of cars, number of people crossing, and the ADT of the roadway.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
And realizing that the park and that parking lot are an event situation as opposed to what's going on between 2 and 4 this afternoon.
Right. And that's why I will say, like, if you do recommend the ACHD undertake a speed study and a crosswalk study, that you make sure you give us several months to do these, like I said, because we would like to wait for better weather to not only do the crosswalk, but do the speed study as well. Because you want to do the speed study when the road conditions are good.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lancaster, we've been waiting to hear from you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sean. Yeah, you answered my questions. So I'll make a motion here in just a second, but like I said, I think the group that has come before us has been reasonable. And I think it's reasonable to ask for these, I'm going to say 3 studies. So speed study, crosswalk study, and you probably don't have a study for this, but we'll call it radar speed feedback sign evaluation. How about that? I think it's reasonable to ask that, you know, with the perspective that, you know, we'll follow the recommendations of the studies. So the engineering, if you will. So if that's agreeable to the group. So yeah, I think that's how I would like to proceed, and it sounds in the comments that sounds okay to the commission. So I move that we ask the Ada County Highway District to perform a speed study, crossing study, and speed feedback sign evaluation at a time determined by ACHD.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Leclerc.
just a sort of a side note. I think probably these studies are good, but I think the best progress we've made is with the police department. They've seen the level of awareness on this issue has been on their agenda already. And many of these issues are enforcement issues, and it's just a matter of being able to patrol everywhere they want to. And so I think that progress has been made. You know, these studies are going to take months, and you might be frustrated by that, but I think progress has already been made, and I think we look forward to having an awareness about this whole area of town from our police department. So I'm encouraged by all that. And so otherwise, pretty much in favor of the motion.
Other comments from the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ballard.
this isn't job security, but for the Bree Group, I was just looking at an article whether or not loud mufflers, drivers of loud mufflers, cars with loud mufflers, if they can be sued by an association. Seems to be some precedent out there. So there's another carrot or another stick. Thank you.
And you will not hear it from me that Mr. Ballard could be a practicing attorney. Other comments regarding the motion on the floor?
I've been accused of worse, Mr. Steed, so.
Is there anything worse?
Seeing no one else, I'll call for the motion. The motion is for this commission to request ACHD to do a speed study on Records Way, to do an evaluation of a crosswalk on Records Way with the parameters as laid out by Mr. Martin, which are more than just, do we get a can of paint? And what did you call the radar speed sign?
Speed feedback sign evaluation, Mr. Chairman.
Speed feedback sign evaluation. There's your motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, gentlemen. And as I told one of you earlier, you're not going to hurt our feelings if you have other things to do. Thank you so much for coming. And you have a city council member that's heard that entire discussion, not to mention the police department. Thank you. Sergeant Dance, we jumped over your spot on the agenda earlier because you weren't here at the moment. If you'd like to go ahead and give us any other police department report at this time, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. The only other item that I would bring forward is that we have been approved by ITD and the Office of Highway Safety for our annual grant. And so, excuse me, we will be participating in a bunch of different mobilizations throughout the year, just as we have been in the previous years. We just completed one over the holidays that encompassed Christmas and New Year's. And again, those are officers working overtime that are enforcing specifically or looking specifically for drunk drivers, aggressive drivers, and so on. And so again, we've been granted that through ITD, that award through ITD, and so we'll be using that throughout the year.
You keep statistics on that you report to ITD, I presume?
Yes, we do.
Would it be possible for you to bring some of that information back to us in the future, just sort of give us some idea of what this special funding is helping generate?
Absolutely. I'd
Okay.
be happy to.
Would appreciate it. Any questions for the sergeant? Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lancaster.
I have a question, but first, thank you, Sergeant Dance, for being here. We look forward to working with you. Hopefully you stick around for a while, don't get promoted, so. My question for you is weather related, so it's snowy outside. this is kind of like my question before, as far as, where do you put your resources? But, does that change when the weather changes, and if so, how?
Mr. Commissioner, yes, it does change. And, lately, the last couple of weeks, we've seen an increase in crashes, of course, with the slick roads. And of course, you have new drivers that have never driven in this kind of weather. And it's the first time driving on slick roads. And so, yeah, we have responded to a higher number of crashes in the city. And that generally, a crash investigation takes up a lot of time, takes up generally a lot of resources, especially if there's cars blocking the roadway. And so I would say the last couple of months, not just during this weather, but also with the increase in traffic in the city, the number of crashes has increased. And we have primarily responded to those calls for service. And that does eliminate a lot of our opportunity to go out and actually do enforcement. And I think that's unfortunately just kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to growth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sergeant.
Any other questions for the sergeant?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Leclerc?
thank you. That we have had in the past, this is sort of a future topics across the brainstorm, I guess. So in the past, we've had, we tried to put into place our own city ordinance on hands-free driving. And then a state law passed. And so we had some preliminary feedback from the department during that, but it might be good to look and see, do we think it's better or worse? Is there anything else we need to ask the mayor to ask the legislature for, or is there any thoughts about, is it been effective? Is it been successful? Are there holes that need to be filled? Stuff like that. So kind of a follow-up on that in the next month or two might be interesting to our commission. There's also stuff going on with downtown alleys and traffic flow, and I understand the council's doing a big parking analysis that's underway. So we want to be in the loop on those things, and as the police department is involved with that to the extent that they are, it may be appropriate for you to give us updates on those areas. And we passed, this is a pretty small one, I think. We had some concerns about an ordinance that was air brakes, limiting the use of air brakes in the city. And they went through the council, but we had some concerns about the way it was written and worded. And could it be enforceable? And so some feedback on that ordinance as well would be interesting to us. There might be opportunities for us to make some modifications or improve that ordinance, or review how useful it is. So those are just kind of a buffet of issues we've had before. And as you come across stuff related to that, let us know, and we may have other requests along these lines in the next few months. That's what I had, and any feedback you have at the top of your head would be welcome. And that's all I have right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Clare. Kind of drop that on you, sir. We'll look forward in the next month or two or three, seeing if you can have an opportunity to check into those a little bit, maybe talk with Mr. Leclerc to get a little more information about what he's looking for, and we'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you. Okay, moving along. Item 5 on the agenda tonight is Valley Regional Transit Connected Meridian, and Stephen Hunt is standing in and patiently standing in for Elisa Taysom. Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm happy to be here, Commission. I'm going to share my screen for presentation. I trust you can see that.
It has come up. It needs to go full screen. There you go. Thank you.
So appreciate the opportunity to be here. We're going to go over just some ridership trends over the last 24-ish months, and also discuss the Connected Meridian outreach that's going on right now. So I forget if that is, I don't know if you can see that full slide, right?
Yes, that's the graph.
So just wanted to, this was a pretty effective way we thought of showing ridership trends over the last several months. The beginning before COVID hit in February of 2020, and you could see that we were around 120,000 boardings a month. The first dot there is where ridership exceeded January of 2019 numbers. We were hitting, well, not quite record, but we were showing growth over 2019 numbers in the last few months, or first few months of fiscal year FY20. That's redundant, of FY20. And then COVID hit, and we start to see that decline in January of 2020. We suspended fares in February of 2020. The ridership continued to decline through the spring. Whoops, that was the wrong button. Through the spring of 2020, and we hit, we resumed fares in October. Actually, that's November of 2020. And our lowest ridership since the beginning of COVID-19 was in February of 2021. Since then, we've started to see some ridership return, although not as quickly as it declined by any means. We saw a ridership bump in May when we did a May in Motion campaign, and again provided free fares. That was an effort to, it's when we were optimistic about COVID being through the worst parts of COVID and hoping for no more Delta. Well, this was before Delta, so we were trying to encourage people back onto transit. We'd been diligent in providing safe transportation throughout the COVID pandemic. We'd issued throughout this period a newsletter called Safe Travels Treasure Valley, identifying all the things that VRT had been doing to keep people safe during the pandemic. Unfortunately, with the Delta variant beginning that very summer, we see ridership decline again and remain relatively stagnant over the summer. In the fall, we typically see ridership go up because of the end of the summer return of school, and we did see wrong button again. We did see some of that happen in this fall. We are over where we were in November of 2020. So that's the first time that we've seen a month over the previous year's month increase since the pandemic. So we're optimistic that we're at the bottom of the ridership trough here, and hope to see ridership continue to increase as we work our way out of the pandemic. I think that's the last ridership. Oh, no, it's not. So on but that's the last point on this graph. I was going to show a couple more graphs about comparing ridership to the nadir of our ridership trough here in November February of 2021. This marks the average monthly ridership as well as the percent change over that February 21 low point. And you can see that since then, ridership is up about 14%. It's bounced up and down a little bit. You can see the impact of the May in Motion campaign, and then also the return of activities that we typically see in the fall. November is usually a slow month because of the holidays, as is December. So we'll probably see that be more or less flat, we would expect, through December. But that shows that we are growing from the low point that we had in February of this past year. One more thing to note about ridership, when we compare the different kinds of ridership, we see things happen a little bit differently. So Ada County local, that's all of the fixed route ridership within Ada County, excluding the inter-county connections. And we saw at the lowest point in the pandemic, we saw a 50% decline in ridership. The highest point in the pandemic since then was in September, and that had come back 10 percentage points. So we were down 40%. So we've started to see that come back a little bit. The inter-county services saw a steeper decline, and it happened earlier. So pre-pandemic ridership taken to January 2020, by May, we'd hit the lowest point on May of 2020. We saw the lowest point on the inter-county ridership. That was down 65%. That's come back a little bit, percentage-wise, that's come back a little bit more from its bottom than the local service. It's still off more than the local service at 45% off in September of 2021. And then Canyon County local is kind of in between those two. It saw a deeper dive initially and has come back a little bit stronger than Ada County. But just wanted to give that general arc of how ridership has gone across the system and among the different services. And for your reference, the city of Meridian pays for service on the inter-county. There's the 40 and 42, both of which serve the city of Meridian, and we're seeing that ridership come back stronger. There isn't any Ada County local service yet in Meridian, but that would be the category that the 30 Pine would be within. And Canyon County local, obviously there's no Canyon County local services in the city of Meridian, as that's all within Canyon County. Before I go on to the next point, I just wanted to stop and ask if there's any questions about ridership.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just a quick question for Stephen. The Harvest Transit service that we have in Meridian, did that show similar changes as the general ridership?
Mr. Chairman, the Harvest Transit had a different kind of track from the fixed route service. I apologize. I should have thought to put that in this presentation. I could provide more detail on that later. There was a period during the pandemic that Harvest Transit more or less stopped providing service. So the ridership decline was much steeper. It has since recovered a lot from where it was. I think it's still down below pre-pandemic levels, but because it fell so much, its percentage increase is quite a bit more than the fixed route service as well. But I can provide better data on that at a future date for Harvest Transit.
Any other questions for Stephen at this point? Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just comment that, Stephen, those are incredible numbers. So thank you for putting them out there to us.
You are welcome.
Okay, Stephen, continue.
So next I wanted to talk about the Connected Meridian project. So we launched an outreach effort within the city of Meridian to look at how public transportation could continue to serve the residents of Meridian. And this is an effort to help feed the upcoming transportation development plan, which is for the years FY23 to 27. You are aware, I hope, of the Valley Connect 2.0 plan, which lays out a number of investments that could be made in the Treasure Valley and for public transportation. It's an unfunded plan. We're looking at creating what the transportation development plan would do is create a funded project list for the next 5 years for service and capital projects. So we're looking at getting public feedback on what our next steps might be. There are 4 different project areas within this outreach: van pool services, and there are many different ways that the public can engage in that discussion about informing people about what van pool does, identifying potential routes, as well as introducing people to the various options for how to engage in van and carpool services. We also wanted people to weigh in on if there were additional fixed route expansions in Meridian. And we also provided a little bit of background on where we are with the 30 Pine route. It's a little bit awkward engaging the public again on service before the Route 30 has begun, but we wanted to be transparent about where we were with that service, as well as solicit input from the public about any growth opportunities over the coming 5 years. So that's the reason for the outreach regarding fixed route service. On-demand service is another area that the VRT's made some progress in. Canyon County, we've launched the first on-demand service in the Treasure Valley. That's been in place for the last year. It is one way to provide a broader coverage, meaning more service to more people. And so we're soliciting some input from the public on that. And then specialized transportation. So this is like the Harvest Transit option within the city of Meridian, or the veteran services that is also provided within the city of Meridian. So specialized transportation options are those where we create a unique service offering for a particular population. Actually, Rides to Wellness also operates within the city of Meridian. And so we're trying to get feedback again from the public about those different transportation options, how they could be useful to them, and ensure that people are aware of those options. So we wanted to share with you the scope of the Connected Meridian campaign and encourage you to be aware of that and other people to participate in that process. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Hunt? Seeing none, I'll thank you very much, Stephen. Again, thank you for your patience getting to you on this topic. And we'll move on now to staff communications from Mrs. Carson.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I stepped out briefly during Stephen's presentation. I did want to note, in case he didn't, that the link for the survey is in your packet. So as a citizen of Meridian, if you want to participate in that survey, the link is there in your packet. The staff communications, I'll highlight some of the main items. Some of these items we've already discussed. The prioritization advisory committee and ID4 operations plan had another stakeholder meeting, and there was some in-depth notes that came out of that. So I included those in your packet. I did want to highlight on page 24 of your packet at the top, the Hollandale-Targhee Bikeway concept study. So ACHD has invited the city to participate in a concept study for a bikeway that will go from Locust Grove to Entertainment Avenue. So the kickoff meeting for that took place with some stakeholders. Then the city of Meridian will be meeting with ACHD next week to discuss that as well. So just wanted you to be aware of that project. This is a transportation commission, so I would hope that entails all modes of transportation. There's some information there on the I-84 eastbound off ramp. I won't get into the weeds on that, as we'll probably have an update on that in February or March. And then the master street map comments were received by ACHD favorably. They seemed to agree with all of the edits that were requested by the city. And those are staff communication updates I have for you, and I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mrs. Carson? I have one on page 23, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6th paragraph talks about shoulder running transit. Can you elaborate on that?
So this is the I-84 corridor operations plan that you're referring to.
Yes, ma'am.
So during the
Meeting notes from that.
During that meeting, there was some discussion regarding the different priorities of the operations plan. So ITD is putting together ID4 operations plan and looking at what the priorities needed to be in that plan. One of the topics was transit, and then from that came, well, how important is transit? What rank does it need to be on the priority list? So those things have yet to be determined. But the shoulder running transit would be, if you think of like it's a dedicated transit lane typically that would run along the interstate. We have Stephen Hunt, he's still on the line, so he may be able to give you a little bit more details. I can tell you that we had not necessarily shoulder running transit, but we did have more of those express lanes in Florida that worked really well that transit would use. And that just kind of provides a way for transit to not be in the main traffic, almost like an HOV lane. It provides a way for them to be out of that main traffic and provide a more consistent schedule. Stephen, do you have anything to add or correct me on for that?
Mr. President, if I could.
Yeah, Mr. Hunt.
So typically shoulder running transit is just used where there's particular congestion. And it's only used when that congestion is present. So you'd be making, and it's a way to get transit either to or through a choke point. They could either be on the left or the right-hand side of the road. Obviously, there are operational considerations that you'd want to consider when considering shoulder running transit, namely the width of the shoulder and the degree to which the shoulder is built out. You're not creating that as a standard lane that would be where transit would be operating in that at freeway speeds. But shoulder running transit, again, it's essentially like a queue jump, or allowing transit to get past backed up traffic. They would be operating at speeds that are considering some kind of differential between the adjacent lane and the transit lane, but you're not operating at full speed on that. So in those ways, I think it's substantially different from either an HOV or a transit only lane. It also is trying to take advantage of existing infrastructure. The idea of bus on shoulders is that you wouldn't be necessarily requiring additional right of way. You'd be using existing pavement, and that may require some upgrades, but essentially you're trying to get better use out of existing right of way.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions for Ms. Carson? Seeing none, before we go to future meeting topics, Councilor Cavanagh, do you have any words of wisdom for us, sir?
Well, I don't know if they're, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I don't know if they're words of wisdom, but perhaps an update for the commission. We will have 3 council members sworn in tomorrow night. Myself, Councilmember Borton, Councilmember Burnt. Encourage you all to come if you'd like. You can also watch online. But with a new council, quote unquote, new council coming in, there's questions and discussions playing out about city council and their liaison roles, particularly in the ex officio space, like with this commission. I've been informed from our incoming likely council president, Councilmember Hoagland, that I'll be moving over to the Parks Department and I'll be attending the Parks Commission meetings. I do not know who you're getting the upgrade to come in and replace me, but I assure you whoever it will be will come in and is really excited to be able to be involved with this commission. I think I've been an ex officio for this commission for at least 3, if not 4 years. I think Miranda was working for West Ada when I first began, and I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to watch this commission evolve. I had a very unique opportunity when I was a city employee when we had the Transportation Task Force before this became a commission to help support that at the staff level, and to see what this commission has become, and to Commissioner Lancaster's comments earlier about you becoming really action oriented. And I hope that you continue to do that, and looking forward to seeing the results from this commission at the city council level in the future. So appreciate you putting up with me. Appreciate you all encouraging me to take a more active role. I've really enjoyed that aspect, and I look forward to bringing some of that to the Parks Commission when I start serving in that role next month.
Well, let me speak for everybody up here and thank you for your time and attention and effort. Having served as council liaison to various and sundry commissions, I know that some of them can be a little more exciting than others, but it's good work. You learn a lot and you can be quite helpful to these commissions. So thank you. Thank you so much and good luck with the Parks and Rec folks. Okay, future, yes, sir. Mr. Butler. Noted. Future meeting topics. The Eustic Road corridor median improvements will come to us in February, as will a report on the field sub-area plan. So those are already scheduled. As Ms. Carson mentioned, the I-84 eastbound off-ramp at Eagle Road is in the future. My conversation with ITD and Caleb Hood's conversation with a separate person at ITD both pointed toward that they are aware of the backup problem in the morning at that eastbound exit ramp. And they mentioned to one of us that there was a possibility they were looking at getting approval to restripe that ramp to add an extra exit lane without having to put any pavement or concrete down or grading to create it. So they certainly can't do that in this kind of weather. So I haven't heard anything on what their progress is on studying that and getting an answer from the powers that be, but maybe we can inquire of them and see if there's been any movement.
Mr. Chair, my most recent update on that would be that we will have some update in the spring.
Thank you, ma'am.
After the weather.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I could give an update on that.
Yes, please.
So it has been looked at. It was approved. You're correct. Now is not a great time to go out and do striping. We're currently working on putting together a striping plan. There won't, with the change that we'll make in the spring, there won't be two exit lanes, but as soon as you get off at Eagle, then shortly after, then it'll switch to 2 lanes, just because the interstate, the way it is right now, won't allow for 2 exit lanes. So that's where it stands. Hopefully we'll be able to find a contractor shortly to be able to do that work in the spring, but it has been approved to move forward with restriping on the off-ramp.
Okay, so you're not going to have 2 exit lanes, but you will have considerable additional stacking.
Exactly, yes. I was also informed that there is a study that is going out for RFP in the next couple months, and it's going to be for the study and design of a potential slip lane between Meridian and Eagle. So when that is completed, then that would be able to add a second off-ramp lane.
Okay, great. Any questions for Mr. Price on that? Okay, thank you very much for jumping in on that. We've mentioned this before, we'll mention it again. We're thinking about a field trip in 22. The only problem with doing that is that we don't know where to go. So
Disneyland.
we're looking to the commissioners as well as staff to come up with some wonderful field trip idea for us. I don't think we want to go do how many cars are jumping in the ditch in the weather tonight, unless you want to ride with the PD. But we do need ideas for a field trip in 22. Talk to myself, Ms. Carson, Caleb Hood, talk to somebody.
There was some ideas floated regarding VRT and riding on their new electric buses. So with the weather the way it is right now, that is not probably something we'll be
Not
doing a
conducive
field trip
to it.
anytime soon, but hopefully when the weather warms up a little bit, we can make a plan, be it transit or something else, so.
Okay, there's an idea. We would like to hear any others you may have. Okay, that's all we have on the agenda. Mr. Ballard.
Before we leave future meeting topics, I had asked a month or two ago, 2 months ago, if we could add an item on how street cleanings are scheduled in the downtown area.
You did. I remember that. Ms. Carson sitting is nodding and saying she's got it written down.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order? With that, the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion from Mr. Ballard,
Second.
second from Mr. Lewis. Non-discussable. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you one. Thank you all. Sergeant Dance, if you're working tonight, put on your warm woolies and your rubber boots.
Thank you, I will.
The difficulty, somebody changed your name and didn't tell you?
No. Someone was asked, cleaning out possibly thing that,
They took the wrong one.
and I saw David, and they go, he's gone.
Walk it over there to Miranda and make her aware.
They tossed it.
Good to see you, sir.